Hello, and welcome to today's event. My name is Ryan Haas, and I am the Michael Armourclass Chair and Senior Fellow at the Brookings Foreign Policy Program. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to co-host today's program with my friend and colleague, Jude Blanchette, who is the Freeman Chair in China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We welcome our audience from around the world for today's event to look at why foreign talent is critical to national security. We have two of the most thoughtful national security practitioners in the United States to help us think through this topic. But first, to briefly set the stage. On May 9th, more than 4 national security leaders sent a letter urging political action to reform and safeguard America's competitive edge in attracting global STEM talent. The letter articulated that the United States faces significant technological and geopolitical competition from China, which has devoted significant efforts and made significant investments into strengthening and expanding its own human capital across strategic sectors in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. The letter concluded that America needs to develop the world's best STEM talent in order to maintain its leadership in the 21st century. Today, we are joined by two of the signatories of that letter to discuss their perspectives and insights on the national security implications of cultivating STEM talent and high-skilled immigration. We have with us today the Honorable Christine Fox, who has served in a range of senior leadership positions across the national security community, including as acting Deputy Secretary of Defense. In that role, she was the senior-most female to ever serve in the Pentagon at that time. She also served as the president of the Center for Naval Analysis. She is currently a senior fellow at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. She has many more accolades and accomplishments, which are all available online. But in the spirit of time and brevity, I'm going to now introduce our second speaker, General Votel. General Votel retired as a 4-star general. He served as commander of the United States Central Command. He also served as commander of the United States Special Operations Command. During his decorated 39-year career, he led forces, special operators, and conventional forces at every level. He currently is the president and CEO of the Business Executives for National Security. He also maintains affiliations with Harvard and West Point, among other institutions. His full biography is also available online. And briefly, a final reminder, we are on the record. We're streaming live to a global audience. If you have questions that you would like to pose to these national security leaders, please send your questions by email to events@brookings.edu or using Twitter with #HumanCapital. So with that, Jude, I'd like to turn it over to you to get our conversation started.
Great, thank you, Ryan, and thanks to our comrades at Brookings for willingness to partner on this important event on this really critical topic, and my sincere thanks to General Votel and Ms. Fox for your time today. Let me start out by first asking you about this letter that you both signed, as Ryan mentioned. Simply put, if I can ask you both, what were your reasons for signing this and what inspired you? Maybe Ms. Fox, I'll turn the question to you first.
Well, thank you both Ryan and Jude for the opportunity to talk about this important topic. And so look, I've been in government or supporting government recently from Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab for a long time. And from those positions, it's clear the critical importance of technology and innovation to our national security, not just today where it is definitely important, but you can see an urgency building for the future. But at the same time, we are really struggling to fill the STEM positions, and those positions are being created far faster than we are producing the highly trained STEM talent we need to fill them. So one way to address that gap is to attract and keep international STEM talent, and that in fact was the topic of the letter that we signed. You know, international STEM PhD students really want to stay in the US and work here. So there's an organization Georgetown has called the Center for Security and Emerging Technology. I'm sure people have heard of it. They did a report that showed that 41% of international students want to stay and work in the US after graduation. So by earning their degree here and then staying to contribute to our workforce, we get a tremendous access to talent, and that is talent that I think we critically need, and that is tied to national security. One other reason I signed the letter and believe in this topic is that I also believe that exposure to our culture and our way of life, coupled with the kinds of relationships you build in university or in the workplace, it can contribute to a more balanced and informed view of the United States globally. And that's important as we fight the floods of misinformation that is used against us today. So for both of those reasons, I thought it was important to sign the letter.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Christine. And it's great to be with all of you today on this really critical topic. And I share a lot of the similar reasons for signing this that Christine just talked about. In my particular case, being a military officer, you really begin to, I think, develop a refined appreciation that people are really the secret sauce to everything we do, whether it is leveraging technology or coming up with innovative ideas or getting hard jobs done. It really is. So I mean, for me, that's kind of a foundational piece of all this. Of course, I've had a lot of opportunity to serve in the special operations community, and I've been in positions that have put me in contact with a lot of our international partners, whether it's been in going to military schools here in the United States or visiting them overseas. And you really do get an appreciation that having the right people in the right place at the right time with the right capabilities and support really can make a difference. Small teams can make a difference in this. And so, again, it just reinforces this idea of getting people to the right place. And of course, our international partners, as Christine talked about, the cultural aspect of this, I think, is extraordinarily important. And we see this in the military all the time. As I traveled around the Middle East as a CENTCOM commander, a majority of the chiefs of defense are graduates of American military schools. And the intangibles that are associated with that are just so fundamental and are so beneficial to the United States that you almost can't put a price on. So the experience and the art and the cultural aspect of it, I think, is really important. So I come at this letter with those ideas as a foundation, but the more pragmatic aspect of me really comes at it from my position as the president and CEO of Business Executives for National Security. And in this position, this organization that I have the great privilege of leading, we have been doing a lot of work on the competitive environment out here. And there is a recognition that it is precarious, it is fragile. And with the actors that we have out there, in order for us to continue to remain competitive and prevail in these competitions, we have got to have not only the technologies and other capabilities, we have to have the people that go along with that. So for me, this is, for us at Benz, and for me in particular, this is a national security issue right here of making sure we have people that have the right STEM talent, and we're bringing them, we're leveraging them from whatever sources might be available, whether it's domestically or internationally.
I really appreciate both of you hitting that point of intangibles, because although there is sufficient data to show the extent to which foreign STEM talent benefits the United States from innovation, economic, or national security, the value proposition would be even stronger if we had measurements of some of these intangibles. But as General Votel, as you mentioned, inherently it's hard to quantify that. And I was thinking as well, especially as the United States and China are breaking off some aspects of people to people, the opinion of the United States that will be formed by future generations of Chinese, if we're not having them come here, will be shaped by the Communist Party of China. And one can imagine the story that they will be telling. I wonder if I can circle back around or just pull the thread a little bit more on sort of General Votel, what you were just talking about. If I can bring this question to Ms. Fox on, where does the rubber meet the road from a practitioner point of view on high-skilled immigration and national security? I mean, where do you see these two overlapping in a practical sense based on your long career working in national security?
Well, in a practical sense, we practically need talent. I mean, I think it's not a lot more complicated than that. Other than I think the intangibles are important. I wish we could measure them, as you were just saying. I completely agree with that. But practically, we are facing tremendous pressure and competition with China. China is aspiring to be a leader in innovation driven development. It's a national priority, and they recognize that human talent is their bottleneck. It's one of their limitations, and they're focusing on it. They're investing in it. And they are working hard to up their universities, to up their standing in the world, to attract that talent and build that talent. And we need to do the same. And we need to recognize that technology, AI, quantum, biotech, you name it, there's so many technologies. That is the future of our national security environment. And we've got to be better, I think, in the talent that we have applying to those problems. So it's a very practical overlap in my mind.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is about shortages, and that's what the issue is here. Is it's a shortage of talent that we require in the country to help us maintain our competitive edge, and so we've got to look at all sources here. And immigration is an important tool in the kit bag here for us to look at in terms of this. And it's not anything new. We're not reinventing anything here. We've done this in the past. I mean, we look at what happened after World War II, even before World War II. We brought talent into the country. We brought people in who made our lives better and helped contribute to the national security of the country. So there's nothing particularly new here, but it's about shortages right now.
You both have touched on China. How has the progress that China is making increased the urgency of preserving the United States' competitive edge in global STEM talent? General, can we start with you, and then we'll turn to Ms. Fox
Sure.
next.
China has taken advantage of the United States being out in front for several decades now, particularly during the period of the so-called global war on terror, when we were doing things that were necessary that we had to do for the nation and for our partners and stuff like this, and has developed and is executing, I think, a very well put together strategy for emerging at the other end of it as a dominant force. And this includes not only intellectual theft of in our property theft in our country. It includes developing skills of their own people. It includes investments in cutting edge technologies. It includes this fusion of the Chinese security and commercial sectors into almost one that is singularly focused on achieving the objectives of this. This is a serious effort, and I believe, while we have been occupied by other things here, and again, I'm not being critical by those things, but many of those things had to be done. They have taken advantage of this and have put us in this position where now we are actually playing catch up, and all that catch up is being exacerbated by the rapid pace of technology and a variety of other things that are happening in our own country here that are kind of slowing down our progress in this area. So, I mean, to me, it's this aggressive strategy that China has had that has allowed them to put us in this position right now.
I would just agree with what Joe said. They have a very aggressive strategy. I think that just to add on to that point, not only do they have an aggressive strategy, it's a well-funded aggressive strategy. They are putting their money where their strategy is, if you will, right? They are investing across the board. You name it. They've identified what it's going to take to achieve their very ambitious tech-related goals and national security-related goals. And then they seem to identify, okay, I can opportunistically fill this need here. I can't fill this one anywhere else, so I'll invest in it. This one I can do a different way, right? So they've got this mapping. And as we close one, they just invest more money there to fill it up. And universities is certainly in that category, building talent. They've identified that, and they really are working hard to increase the throughput of their universities, the standing of their universities, and the standing of the research that comes out of those universities. It's not to our levels yet in terms of standing, but they're working on it. And, when you watch them put their mind to something and the investments they have at their disposal and the size of their population, they have a lot of ability to achieve those goals. And we've got to be as focused if we hope to maintain the edge.
You both have decades of experience at the highest levels of our national security leadership. My sense is that there's an increasing awareness, as your letter reflects, on the importance of attracting and cultivating talent and immigration as a source of national security competitiveness. Has this always been the case, and we're just sort of realizing this later? Is this a newer thought process that is beginning to take root? Ms. Fox, can we start with you?
Sure. So, it's a really interesting question. So I was in government from 2009 to 2014. I was in President Obama's administration, and I was in the Defense Department, and I was very focused on programs and budget and tying programs and budgets to strategy and national security. And it was a time when we were really just coming to terms with the threat of China as a technological power. In my memory, okay, and it's a memory, in that time, immigration was still a cornerstone of American culture. And in my memory, the entwined nature of the Chinese-US economies and global supply chain was taken as kind of a given and something that required us to be engaged with China. So the atmosphere in my memory is different than it is today. I think today we no longer believe that the entwined future is a given. There's a push to separate some of that. And the enthusiasm for it is definitely tempered. And as we seek to disconnect, we're also focusing on trying to become more self-reliant. China is also trying to become more self-reliant. And again, they have resources and they're putting them on them aggressively in many areas. And I think that we're talking a lot about it, but we're not getting there as fast. And that worries me, frankly. I think that this, as we disconnect, if we don't urgently focus on this in the same way, then I think we stand to struggle in the competition with China. So I really think that this is a backdrop that's different than when I was in government. But I still think that even with the change in backdrop, we can maintain the United States as an attractive place for international STEM talent, including Chinese talent. And I hope that we will, because China has a lot of talent. And if we cut ourselves off from that and from their research and from their thinking, aren't we cutting ourselves off from fundamental basic research advancement that we desperately need to be leveraging?
I absolutely agree with what Christine has just said there. I think that's exactly right. Just as a military officer, not all my career spent interacting in the policy community. I mean, the approach that we had with China is fundamentally different than the approach we had with the Soviet Union in terms of how we looked at it. And it isn't, and it's just not the Department of Defense or the national security enterprise in this interweaving. It's the commercial sector, it's the private sector that is deeply interwoven into this. And so the implications go much beyond just simple the more straightforward national security concerns. It goes to economic concerns and a variety of other things that we have here that I think it's different in terms of how we approach this with this, and whether we came to realize that too late or not, I think can be an academic discussion at some point in the future. I think the point now is that we are in the situation we are in with an aggressive China that has a plan, is moving out smartly on it, is dedicating resources to it, and is making progress towards their objectives. And we've got to think differently about this right now.
So I wonder if I can now just pivot a bit to thinking about what are some of the bottlenecks we're facing. It sounds like from the first 10 or so 15 minutes of this conversation, what I've been hearing is we need to think about this not as a nice to have and not as the US being generous, but actually as an imperative for thinking about addressing the national security concerns, legacy, but also emerging ones. And General Votel, I appreciate your point on this is about shortages, skills gap that we're able to fill through the blunt fact that people are still looking to come to this country and innovate here rather than going somewhere else. Now I'd like to ask, from your position, where are we not getting this right? Where's the mismatch between that supply side of people showing up at embassies across the world to try to get visas to come to the United States to study, work, and live. Where is that misaligning with the demand signals that we're sending here politically or otherwise? General Votel, if I can start with you on that question.
Sure, yeah. There's really four areas that I would kind of point to here with this, and some of them would be familiar, some would be less familiar. And I really think it starts with strategy. It starts with a plan for how we are going to maintain our competitive edge, how we are going to protect our national interests in this very complex environment that we envision for the next 20, 30, 40 years, how we're going to do that. And it is really critical that we have a strategy behind which not only the government and the national security enterprise get behind, but which the private sector and civil sector can appreciate as well. I think it's important to reflect back to the summer of 1953 when President Eisenhower convened the Solarium Commission to basically design how we were going to approach the Soviet Union. And out of that came the containment policy and everything else, that the strategy and everything else that largely migrated across different administrations, different parties, and lasted for 30 or 40 years and allowed us to prevail. We need that kind of effort right now to kind of get our act together in terms of this as a nation. It won't surprise you that the immigration process is playing a significant role in this. It is a complex process, particularly when we're looking at foreign talent, bringing students and keeping them here. It is when you have a process that requires you to get an immigration lawyer to navigate it, that should be an indication that we might not have this right in terms of what we're doing. We need to have a more simplified, straightforward immigration process. I think that is more clearly linked to our national strategy and objectives in terms of this. Nimble bureaucracies. One of the challenges, I'll just be a little blunt about the Department of Defense. Just bringing our own domestic talent into the Department of Defense is a challenge. It takes months for people to get on board, and we haven't even talked about getting them clearances. So we've got to have a more nimble way to bring people into the government, to incentivize them, to allow them to move back and forth between the government work and private sector, and allow that to happen. I think these are obstacles right now that I think are preventing people from choosing, who might otherwise choose to work for the benefit of the nation, because it's just too hard. We've made it too hard. I think the last thing is, I do think we have to address, again, another intangible here, and that is this idea of trust in the nation, and a consensus towards national security. I do think this is something we have to work on. We are a little bit all over the map in terms of this. We have villainized people coming from certain countries to our nation, and we've made it difficult for them to come, and we've cast undue suspicions on this. I think we have to reckon with this. We are, in fact, a nation of immigrants, and that has long been our strength, and we need to recognize that, I think, again, and again, smartly approach this. But in my view, those four things are what I'm thinking about in terms of the obstacles that are constraining us in this area.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Fox.
Well, that's a great list and impossible to improve upon. I particularly liked your first point about the need for a comprehensive strategy, one that transcends administrations and that is holistic and implementable. And I know we can do this, but we don't. And it is holding us back. So I couldn't agree more. On your second point, Joe, I think that the point about immigration is the one that fits very directly with the letter and the topic on foreign talent. And I mean, I'm not an immigration expert by any stretch. I know that there are lots of barriers cited, like numerical caps and unclear requirements and the need for an immigration lawyer, et cetera. But it has real consequences, and it's having real consequences right now in a measurable way for our ability to attract and retain foreign talent in STEM. And I've just got a tidbit for you here that from 2016 to 2019, international student enrollment dropped 7% at US universities, but increased by 52% in Canada because Canada has immigration-friendly policies. And for Indian STEM students, a very important part of our STEM workforce, it fell from 40% here and increased by 182% in Canada. And that's according to the National Foundation for American Policy. So and when I look at those statistics, I think, and that's before COVID, okay? So, we used to be the place to go. And I still think in terms of the prowess of our academic institutions, we are the place to go. And the desire to work here is an attractor for the US as a place to go. But if you can't do it, they read the tea leaves and they are in STEM and there's a global STEM workforce shortage. So they're kind of calling the shots. And we've got to start thinking about it from their perspective if we hope to attract and retain them. Which goes back to strategy, by the way, excuse me, but do we hope to attract and retain them? I think that's a big question that's part of that strategy point. Sorry.
No, I appreciate those thoughts, and it does just remind me that there's and this is a common feature of the U.S. is sometimes we get into a rut of complacency that because we have the best universities, we can put this on autopilot. And to your point, just anecdotally in conversations with Chinese friends, I'm hearing more and more about individuals thinking about Australia, the UK, Canada, because guess what? They've got pretty darn good universities there too. So we may have the Harvards, the MITs, but the University of Toronto is a fantastic school, as is Oxford, as is Australia National University. So I wonder if I can drill down just a bit more and ask, are there specific research or technological development areas where you think some of the limitations and bottlenecks we've just described are having the most acute effect? Or do you see this as just a broad general bottleneck? But if I could wave a wand and remove some of these barriers in key specific research or technology areas, what do you think are the priority areas where we need to really break through these log jams? General Votel, I'll start with you, please.
Yeah, this is probably a short answer here. In terms that I mean, I think there are a variety of areas. I mean, things like microelectronics comes to mind in terms of this as areas where we ought to be putting some amount of effort. But I actually, again, I'm a little bit more of a generalist in this, and so I have more of a tendency to trend towards the intangible aspects of people coming here and getting them. And so I'm certain there's some other areas, whether it's biotech. I mean, I think the United States actually leads in some of these areas, but it could be vulnerable. So I'm sure there are some other areas in terms of that. The one that just really jumps out to me is the idea of microelectronics.
Any pop out to you, Ms. Fox, of real priority areas where we're shooting ourselves in the foot?
Yeah, I don't have an area, because I think that STEM in general is the thing, right? I mean, it's tech is exploding, and it's so hard to predict what's the next piece of the explosion.
Right.
And all of the different technical fields are contributing to that technical explosion. And I just want to make sure that the US is right on the pointy edge of whatever that thing is. And I think that that's the broader group of talent. And just one other point on this, cross-disciplinary is really core to a lot of the technical innovation that's going on today, either commercially or in universities. And so you've got to have a mix of disciplines to see some of these innovative solutions. So no one area really pops out to me. But again, I don't have numbers at my fingertips on if there is a dearth in a particular field. Sorry.
I actually think both of your answers were far better than the question, because what I just heard reflected back to me is part of this as well is positioning the United States to be making the breakthrough of the technology, which doesn't exist yet. And so there's a prerequisite thickness of human capital that you need to have established to position yourself for that next breakthrough. So I appreciate your answers, because actually that's a better way of thinking about it.
Yeah, Jude, I would also add, I think there's to reinforce or to add on to what Christine just said, I think there's a quality associated with just STEM excellence and people that we have invested in this area, people that think that way. I mean, one thing I've learned in my 3+ years of being out of the military and associating myself with a lot of people in the business community is most of the people that I associate with, they aren't doing the same job that they started with. They have migrated to something else. And this is a very, I think, a very unique American feature here, and something we ought to be leveraging and think about the power of people that have a solid foundation in STEM and what it could mean for the nation for whatever comes down the pike, and whatever the nation needs. I just think it's really foundational, and it's the quality of the STEM education, I think, that's really important.
And if I could just pile on to what Joe just said, one more thing, I think there's also something about the culture of the United States that leads to innovation when you put these talented people together and give them freedom to run. And that's what our innovation tech sector is doing. And you can see we are the leaders of innovation development here. Now, we've got some work to do on adoption, particularly in the Defense Department. You can always point to challenges, but that innovation spirit and the culture of the United States with the STEM talent in it, I think it's part of what makes us potentially so attractive globally, as well as to our own folks.
If I can then pile on that, make one final observation, looking at, my day job is looking at China's domestic political economic system. And I think early in the conversation, you were both of you rightfully highlighting many of the strengths China has, primarily based on, I think, seriousness and sense of urgency. But I also, Ryan and I talk about this quite a bit. China is not a country where you're going to have an Elon Musk who is running, crosswise with the current political trends. And China used to have some of these individuals. Their names were Jack Ma, but politics in China is making it difficult to have those real breakthroughs that come from thinking outside the box. Technologically, economically. And so I wonder, China has a vision to plan innovation, and they're certainly going to get some wins off of that. But this is where finding the secret sauce in the United States is openness to talent, heterodox opinions, rule of law, stir, mix, put in the oven, and you get some pretty fantastic things. So even as we're thinking about the fact that we need much more intentionality about this, I think also, which you both just highlighted, recognize how strategically important the lack of planning can be in just an open, creative environment, and finding ways to buttress and support that.
Thanks, Jude. I think that was well said. Yeah.
Awesome.
Ms. Fox, you have gone in and out of government. You've served both in the Pentagon, but also in non-government research institutions, including your current role at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. How has this fluidity that we've been discussing affected your views of the importance of talent for national competitiveness and national security?
Yeah, so you're right. I've been in government. I've been outside of government. I've always been, though, in my non-government, outside of government things in non-for-profit places like the Applied Physics Lab. And in those areas, a place like APL, it plays an incredibly important role in helping the government respond to new threats or come up with innovative solutions to any number of challenges. But like everywhere else, APL is competing for STEM talent. And I have a very personal view of that being there. And APL is competing for STEM talent with Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley can afford a lot more in salary, and they actually make a place like APL a target. But I don't hold it against them because they're struggling with STEM talent and Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is the engine behind a lot of our innovation. It all needs to be fed. And so my perspective from being a competitor with Silicon Valley and then also seeing sort of the struggle we all face is that this really is a problem, as Joe is saying, from his Ben's perspective. I want to talk, though, also about something Joe said earlier, though, about inside of government, which is something that I think is a very unique challenge. Joe talked about the bureaucracy of hiring, and that's certainly a problem. But, if a place like the Applied Physics Lab, which has a lot of freedom, is a great, it's always voted as one of the best places to work, blah, 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 right? We struggle in competing with Silicon Valley. How does the US government compete, right? It's tough. If you're a talented STEM person to go through the process of getting a GS position and getting into government, it's really hard. And we have to find a way to have talented STEM professionals inside of our national security apparatus. And that is the most junior to the most senior, and it's civilian and it's military, in my view. And if we can't do that, we're going to fail to develop the right defense program. How are we going to know what the right acquisitions is? Or are the systems being developed appropriately? Or are they taking advantage of artificial intelligence in the right way? Or for the military, what's the right technology to adopt? How does it change our concept of operations? For management, right? There's all kinds of things that artificial intelligence and data analytics can do to help government manage more efficiently. And we kind of all know that's needed, right? So, but there's very, very few STEM professionals in government. And really that just has to change. And look, I want to give a shout out to Secretary Hicks, current Deputy Secretary of Defense. She has identified this. She's established a position for the Chief Data AI Officer that reports directly to her. She's putting a spotlight on this problem, and I applaud the effort. But we got a long way to go here, and we've got to make government more attractive for STEM talent if we hope to achieve our goals.
I think that's very well said, and I'm encouraged to hear that Secretary Hicks is focusing her attention on this issue, because I think it's absolutely critical. If I could go back for a minute to where we were a moment ago, talking about troubling trend lines of foreign student enrollment, people voting with their feet to go to Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, and elsewhere instead of the United States. Is there anything more that our higher education institutions can be doing to attract top talent from overseas, or is this just more of a systemic issue where higher education institutions are at the whip end of this problem and are not able to affect it themselves?
For Christine or for me?
Ms. Fox, why don't we start with you, and then if the general has any thoughts to add, we welcome it.
Well, sure. I'll give it a shot. I think, so first of all, my exposure to how universities handle this is not broad, right? I have a lot of exposure to how Johns Hopkins thinks about it, and a few other universities. And I think we can't lose sight of the fact that our university system is dependent on foreign national students coming here. There's a high fraction of student positions that are filled by foreign nationals, and they pay full tuition. And our universities need that full tuition to keep vibrant research programs. Those vibrant research programs are necessary to attract the right professors. It's the right professors that attract the best students, and so you get the cycle, right? Foreign students are fundamental to the cycle. So to my observation, every university president knows this, and they are aggressively recruiting all over the world, including in China. I'm a national security person, right? So I go to my first Hopkins meeting and I hear that, all about their outreach to China. And I'm like, wait a minute. But then I had to think about it. No, we want Chinese students to come here, right? So they know it and they're reaching out against it. So I don't want to just say there's nothing they can do, but I think the trends that we were talking about are reflective more of the situation in the United States and their options to stay here, because I think they really do want to work here and to have opportunities here. And the more that we become a deterrent, not in a welcoming environment like I think we used to be, and more of a pushing away, I think it bleeds into our workplaces too. I think there's a reticence to hire foreign nationals because the national attitude is changing. I think those are the factors that are surrounding it that are the most significant. But I wouldn't be able to say that there's nothing that a university could do more. I just don't know.
I actually think what you said there is right. That sounds right to me in terms of the environment having an impact on this. And I'm sure there's some things that our colleges and universities can do. If you can look at the university system in the United States, and you look at a place like the Hoover School out on the West Coast. You look at Belfer. I mean, these are centers of excellence for thought. And again, I don't have enough time to give a list of all the great schools out there that are doing extraordinary work and become these centers of excellence. And it just seems to me, and they're recognized as well. I mean, we go here. We locate our federally funded research and development centers there. Our Department of Homeland Security reaches out to the academic departments and institutions and develops relationships with them. It just seems to me that we have a very fertile ground for rethinking about our public-private partnerships between the government and universities in terms of how we address this particular problem right here. And I just think there's I will lack the specifics here to do it, but it just as a kind of an observer of this, to me, it just seems we have a lot of the raw materials in place to do this right now.
I was just also thinking that one of the constraints here is we're unable to measure what we're giving up when people don't come here. And you can really only notice it when you see the positive examples. And so one that Ryan and I were talking about yesterday is one of the newest Fields Medal winners for mathematics, grew up in South Korea, came to the United States, got denied, I think, from 10 of the schools he applied to until he got into one, studied under a previous Fields Medal winner who was from Japan, now teaching in the United States. So you see these examples that are the kind of forehead slappers of, yeah, this is it, right? It's either these two Fields Medal winners were either here in the United States, where they're fundamentally contributing to the outer frontiers of mathematics, which of course bleeds over into national security, or they're somewhere else. And we've controlled some of that destiny by just how we set ourselves up to have more, potential Fields Medal winners coming here. General Votel, and I'm just cognizant of the time, I may just steer through the next few questions, and maybe I'll ask Ryan to be looking at some of the audience questions to see if there are any that stand out that we want to ask. But General Votel, I wonder if I can ask you an analog question to the one that Ryan asked Ms. Fox about her time in Johns Hopkins and in DoD. You've now made a transition and are a bridge between the national security establishment, the military, and the private sector. So I wanted to ask, in this new role, or relatively new role, and in the conversations you're in now in the private sector, what are some of the ways in which you're seeing the human talent dimension or challenge or opportunity differently now that you're engaging more with the private sector from your distinguished career in the military?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So let me just start with saying, talk about my military experience and my observation there before I kind of jump to the transition. And I think I want to make it real clear that the military, and that's the sector that I come from, I think is doing a lot of good things in terms of developing talent and developing good people out there to do stuff. I mean, we are great at empowering people. We're great at pushing trust down. We're great at assigning responsibility. We're great at allowing people to be innovative and look at a problem and try to solve it. I'll share a quick war story here with you, if you would. At the beginning of the fight against ISIS, we were really struggling with how we were going to deal with these foreign fighters who are coming from hundreds of countries and using social media to do it. We actually, we had our young people kind of came up with an idea how we might do that, so we started looking at social media, and really it led to a much deeper investment in data analytics and data scientists and all kinds of. I was amazed as I watched this over the course of 3 or 4 years through several subsequent assignments, just how innovative our people had come. And we didn't make it. There were no bureaucracy changes. We didn't create a different specialty. We just allowed people to solve the problem, and it made all the difference for us in this military military campaign. So I want to stipulate that up front, that, you know, there are, again, back to the intangibles, there are some things that you have to do to you know, no amount of education can overcome a boss that doesn't allow people to be empowered or have responsibility to do things, frankly. But the competition, you know, now speaking to my transition, the competition is fierce. You know, it's fierce within the business community, and it's certainly fierce when you juxtapose that against what our national security enterprise requires, and it's not a level playing field. The Department of Defense and many of our other institutions of government cannot offer the same type of incentives and other things that the private sector can, and so this is a real disadvantage, I think, for the government sector. That said, here's my other observation. My other observation is that people do want to serve in the government. They do want to contribute to the security of the nation, and there's lots of people that would like to do that. Many of them will look at it as kind of entry level work, and some will stay around for a long period of time, and others will migrate out to the private sector. People want to do that, and they want to be able to come back, but the obstacles that we have in place really work against this. We make it very difficult. It takes about 6 or 7 months for somebody to come on board in the Department of Defense. It's a long process to get people on board in the positions, and so we've got to look at how we address that. So I think people want to do that. And the other piece I would just share with you is that I think there's a real need to look at how we cross-level expertise and information and create programs that promote people understanding the private sector, people understanding government work, and allow people to go back and forth between that. We have training with industry kind of things that help develop people. I think more of these programs are the types of things we ought to be thinking about going forward.
I wonder if I can just put one final question, single question that I'll ask both of you to take a whack at, and then Ryan and I will turn to some of the audience questions, which is, you know, I can imagine people listening to this going, yeah, that all sounds good, but there are security risks that come with an open society and welcoming people in, especially when we're thinking about individuals coming from countries where we have some real national security frictions. You just had a speech yesterday by the heads of MI5 and the FBI talking about some of the threats coming from China in terms of economic espionage. There are cases verifiable cases where we've had some challenges with researchers coming over and stealing US IP. How do we think about navigating this space of recognizing, I think everyone on this panel does, the clear, overwhelming benefits that come from openness and receptivity to talent, but we have these discrete components of that which bring real attendant security challenges and risks. Is a balance possible, and any thoughts on where we can step up our game on the defensive to make sure that we're better facilitating flows in? Ms. Fox, maybe I'll start with you if I may.
Sure. So look, you know, I've spent my whole life working national security. And so I'm not blind or naive about these risks. These risks are real. And open academic exchanges with international students and professors, particularly from countries like China, does actually cause some threats. But, you know, we have to be open and understand these risks, and we need to take steps to mitigate them. But in my view, it doesn't necessarily mean shutting down all the avenues for international students to come here or stay here after graduation. The incidents that you refer to are very real and very troubling, but they're also discrete when you look at the large number of overall Chinese students that have come to the United States versus the ones that led to the incidents that you mentioned. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't pay close attention. And we also need to recognize that the division in the United States between academic research and government is very different than the division or lack of division in China. And so the Chinese students that come here have a very different kind of model, if you will. And we don't necessarily appreciate that in our own institutions. So, I'll just offer one thing. Back in 2019, the National Science Foundation tasked the JSONs to evaluate this very challenge and to come up with some recommendations on how to safeguard our academic institutions and still encourage fundamental research in an open global society. And they came up with several really, really good, doable, implementable recommendations that I commend to anyone who is interested in this topic. And I'm not going to go through them all here, but I'll just tell you they fall in the category of NSF requiring more stringent disclosure of conflicts of interest or dual salary type situations, with penalties for non-disclosure, ruling out a university from funding in the future if they violate these things, or better information safeguarding, particularly of government-funded research that's of a sensitive nature, and that is something the university can certainly do. They also talked about requiring training by the FBI or the intelligence community on the specific nature of the risks of having foreign nationals embedded in their universities as a prerequisite for getting NSF funding. So there were more, right? But the point is there are things that you can do, and this study identified them, and they were very tangible things to be done. In the same study, though, they recommended that the NSF also reaffirm the principles of open and unrestricted research, and that we engage the foreign student body to identify, recruit, and retain the best scientific talent to the United States. And so that's what it's all about for me. I want the best talent in the United States. We have to deal with these issues. That means we have to look at them, we have to address them, but we have to not close ourselves off as a result.
Yeah, I really associate myself with Christine's comments here. I think that's really well stated there. And, I think these are mitigatable, manageable risks that we can look at, and particularly mitigatable and manageable when we look at them in the context of a broader strategy for what we are trying to achieve as a nation. When we just shoot, ready to shoot, aim kind of stuff here at and make policy changes like, we're not going to allow this country or not going to allow these students come anymore. This, to me, is doing damage to kind of our national security posture. So I think the risk assessment has to be done in the context of what it is that we are actually trying to accomplish as a nation.
With that, I'd love to bring in a few questions from our audience. One of them is from Brendan Bordelon, who's a tech policy reporter with Politico. He asks, Congress and the White House are working hard to bring a significant chunk of microchip manufacturing back to the United States. Do you believe that effort will be successful without immigration reform that provides a pathway for foreigners with STEM PhD or master's degrees to receive green cards or otherwise work in the United States? If not, why not? General, can we start with you and then we'll bring in Ms. Fox?
Yeah, we'll go to Christine pretty quick here. I'm not sure I have the background to answer this question, so let me defer here to Christine on this one.
Sounds good.
Well, I have a minuscule background in this, but I'll take a stab. So first of all, I think CHIPS is big. It's important. We've got to deal with it. It's going to be enormously challenging, and it's not just talent. We've got to invest an awful lot of money to bring this into the United States. And this is just one of those areas where we're trying to rebuild our self-sufficiency. And it's a very important one, but it's going to be expensive. But yes, part of the STEM talent problem or challenge is tied up in the talent to do that. Now, we have talent, we just don't have enough, right? In the global world, we have the very high-end design and software development behind the chips part in the US, and then we've offshored all the other stuff. Now we want to bring all the other stuff in. It's going to take a whole lot more talent to do that. I think we need to think hard about levels of talent, right? There's the high-end talent, and that's been kind of the focus of our remarks today, but there's also retooling you can do of our workforce and things like that. So we need the strategy that Joe keeps talking about in a holistic approach to meeting these needs. But I think the question is on point. We absolutely need to consider the importance of STEM talent when we talk about these strategic goals, like gaining self-sufficiency.
There's a question here, and I've heard various iterations of this when we've been in these discussions on the importance of STEM talent, which is, look, that's great, but we have, that means we're taking opportunities that could be coming to Americans, or why aren't we taking the same amount of focus on STEM immigration and plowing resources into developing and giving the skill sets to the Americans who are here and looking to move up the value ladder themselves? How would you approach a conversation with someone like that who is saying, why aren't we investing in our own damn schools for Americans rather than this quick fix of bringing in talent, which is probably at an advanced education level vis-a-vis the American and is going to be able to outcompete them? General Votel, I might go to you
Yeah,
first.
no, I think the answer I would probably provide is we should be doing both, frankly. I don't think that anybody can argue with the idea that we ought to be investing much more in our schools and much more in programs that encourage our young people to go into STEM areas here and develop knowledge and expertise in this particular area. I think this is absolutely important, and I think you are beginning to see a lot of organizations in the private sector begin to do this. They're establishing programs. The Department of Defense actually has programs in this. I think last year about 1,200 students went through programs related to developing STEM skills. Through the Department of Defense. So I think there's a lot we have to do here in terms of this, but I think that I think you can do both. I think the need is extraordinarily great right from this. So I don't think we're at a place here where bringing in immigrating or allowing foreign students to come in and develop these skills and then hopefully work in our companies or in our laboratories or wherever they end up is an endangering American workers at this particular point. I'm not convinced of that, and I think we can approach both. If we come to some other equilibrium at the other end of this, then perhaps we can begin to address that. But that's not the problem that we're facing right now.
Yeah, I just pile on and completely agree with what General Votel just said. Look, I actually really appreciate the question because we have been solely focused in this conversation on the immigration aspects of the problem, but we need a strategy and a holistic approach to the problem, and the vast majority of that strategy needs to be focused on us, on the U.S., on our universities, and access to those universities and those jobs for all peoples of the United States. STEM is still an area where women and minorities are grossly underrepresented. And even if they get into it, they don't stay in it. And that's just not okay. And it's not okay on so many levels, right? But it's not solving the problem of we have a dearth of talent in the STEM areas to maintain our goals and our strategies. So we have to work on all of it. And we've just focused today on a piece of it. But I agree with Joe that the totality of the need is so great. There's no way that what we're talking about is going to take opportunities away from Americans. We need Americans to step into those opportunities, and we need to find ways to help them get there.
I think that that's a very compelling point, and it would be a powerful point to end on, but I do want to squeeze in one more question because we received a great question from a student who is the president of the Carnegie Mellon University Graduate Student Assembly. His name is Divanish Kasik. And the question is this: there's a sense in Congress where a lot of people agree with what you have been describing about the importance of a both and approach to level up our talent in the United States, including by bringing in talent from overseas. But there's also a sense that this is not really a national security, immigration is not really a national security policy issue, and that it's a difficult political issue to deal with. So what would you say to people who hold that view?
Vote. The exercise the fundamental right that we have as Americans here to put people into positions who are going to act in the behalf and at the behest of the country and what our national interests are. Frankly, I don't know what more to say other than that. Frankly, I sense the frustration of that maybe comes behind the question a little bit here in terms of this, that people genuinely agree with this, but yet we can't get to a solution. The time to do this is now. I believe we are running out of time to make the fundamental changes that we need to make to maintain our own competitive advantage going forward. And we've got to get serious about this, and it's got to start with our people, and the people that we need to keep us where we want to be.
I would agree with that completely. I would just pile on by saying that my current view is that as a nation on this issue and many, many others, we don't have enough of a national security focus in our conversation. We are very internally focused, and there's certainly issues we need to be focused on internally, but national security is not a given for this country. And we have to be alert and pay attention to that. And this, like so many issues, has a national security lens. And I agree with the question. It's not really the focus of the immigration discussion, and it needs to be. We need to bring national security issues into a lot more of our national discussions, because if we don't, we really run the risk of missing out, I think.
Well, as I think you would expect from two national security professionals, we end this event a minute early. Very punctual in how you stuck the landing, Ms. Fox, with an eye on the clock. So your reputation is intact. I just want to thank you so much. I think the point you just ended on is actually the origin of this discussion, and this broader project that Ryan and I are working on to be thinking about development, cultivation of human capital with an eye towards national competitiveness and national security. And I think your comments earlier on of this is not a nice to have, and this is not out of a spirit of generosity. This is hard-nosed thinking about U.S. national security and what we're going to do for the challenges of the future, not just the present, to give the United States the best chance and position it has to be competing with some very significant new national security challenges. So thank you both for just an excellent conversation. And I think I speak on behalf of Ryan that we hope that we can continue this conversation. We were just scratching at the end of this another important topic, which is what do we do to focus on the talent base we have here, and how do we deepen and thicken that? So there's lots of other conversations to be had around this space. Thank you first and foremost to our comrades at the Brookings Institution who put this together. These look easy, and when they do, that means there's a lot of people behind the scenes who have worked to make it such. Thanks to Comrade Ryan Haas for partnering on this and this important discussion. And thanks to all of you. We had just great questions coming in, and unfortunately we only got to about 3% of those, but please know that we're keeping these, and the questions are helping us to think about what events and research we should be doing in this space moving forward. So thanks to everyone. Have a wonderful, happy Thursday, and look forward to seeing you at a future CSIS Brookings event. Thank you. We good?